It started with one careless act. A man spit near a wall and woke up choking on air that no longer belonged to the living.
In Houston, they say the walls of the old St. Mary's Clinic still breathe.
Still remember, and if you listen close enough, you can hear a woman whisper from the other side, begging you not to repeat his mistake. If you have ever laughed off an old superstition, or thought ghosts were just stories to scare kids, this one might change your mind. Hit that like button, subscribe, and listen carefully, because tonight's story will remind you that some places never forget. It had been years since anyone had spoken about St. Mary's Clinic. Back in the 70s, it was one of Houston's most respected maternity hospitals. Clean white halls, soft lights, and the smell of roses from the garden outside. That is until one summer night when a young woman named Elena died during childbirth. The doctor in charge, Dr. Howard Bell, vanished the very next morning, leaving behind his coat, his notes, and a rumor that spread through the whole city. They said Elena was not just another patient. She was his secret lover, and the baby she carried was his. They said she begged him for help when the pain started, but he refused to call another surgeon. He wanted to keep it quiet, wanted to hide the affair. But something went wrong, and when she screamed for help, he covered her mouth to silence her, and she never screamed again. By the time the nurses broke in, the fire had already started. The oxygen tanks, the curtains, everything burned. Elena's body was found near the back wall, charred, frozen in a silent plea for air. Dr. Bell was gone, and no one ever saw him again. The hospital closed, and time buried the story under dust. Years later, a construction company bought the property, turned it into a small apartment complex. White paint, new floors, fresh tenants who had no idea what had happened there. One of those tenants was Luis, a quiet delivery driver from Mexico. He worked long hours delivering furniture, kept mostly to himself, never caused trouble. He moved into the garage room behind the old building because it was cheap, quiet, and close to the freeway. He liked the smell of the evening air, the hum of trucks, and the taste of betel nut that kept him awake during late shifts. He had heard a few jokes about the place, that the back wall still smelled like smoke, that sometimes the lights flickered near the old maternity wing. He laughed it off. Just stories from bored workers. But the thing about stories is that they usually start with something that really happened. It was a humid night in July, the air thick, the kind that clings to your skin. Luis parked his truck behind the complex, unwrapped a piece of red betel nut, and started chewing. He leaned against the wall to stretch his back, spat a streak of red juice near the bricks, and sighed in relief. That was it. One thoughtless moment, one careless spit near the place where Elena had taken her last breath. He went inside, showered, and lay down on his narrow bed. The sound of crickets outside slowly faded until the night turned heavy, unnaturally still. He woke up gasping. His chest felt like someone had placed a slab of stone on it. He tried to move but couldn't. The air had turned freezing cold. His breath fogged in the dark, and then he heard it. A faint drip-drip from the corner of the room, like water hitting tile. But when he turned his eyes, he saw it was not water. A figure was standing there, half hidden by shadow. A woman in a hospital gown soaked in blood. Her face was burned on one side. Her hair matted to her skin. Her eyes were wide, empty, and yet full of something that saw everything. Luis tried to scream, but only a whimper came out. The woman's head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something only she could hear, and when she spoke, her voice cracked through the cold like broken glass. "You spit where I died." Luis's heart hammered. "I am sorry," he managed to say. "I did not know." The figure took one slow step closer, and Luis saw the outline of her swollen belly, burned yet still visible under the thin fabric. She was breathing, or maybe not breathing at all. He could not tell. "This was my home," she whispered. "My child's home. Until he killed me?" Luis's body trembled. He reached for the only thing within reach, a glass of water. He began to whisper prayers in Spanish, splashed the water into the air, and shut his eyes tight. When he opened them, she was gone. He spent the rest of the night sitting upright, light on, hands shaking. When the first sunbeam touched the floor, he grabbed his bag and went straight to the landlord. The landlord, a man named Richard, looked at him with confusion. "Leaving already? You just moved in last month." Luisa's voice was hollow. "That wall remembers her. I am not staying another night." He left before noon. Never came back. Never even collected his last paycheck. That would have been enough. A man haunted for his disrespect. A ghost finally remembered, but something changed after he left. The new tenant who moved into the same room, a college student named Maya, reported strange smells of medicine and smoke. She told Richard she heard whispers near the back wall at night, soft, like someone trying to speak through layers of dust. Richard dismissed it. "Old pipes," he said. "Humidity, electrical noise." Until one night, he went himself to check the wiring and noticed the bricks near the ground were stained a faint reddish color. He touched them, and his finger came away with something sticky, dark, and warm, even though the wall was cold. He called the maintenance crew the next day, but before they could repaint, a storm hit, and lightning struck the old power line that ran across the property. It split the transformer clean in half, setting a small fire exactly where Luis had spat months before. The firefighters said it was strange. The fire spread fast at first, then suddenly died out, as if someone had smothered it from inside the wall. The storm raged for hours. Rain hammered the old building as if trying to wash away its sins. Richard stood under the flickering porch light, watching firefighters pull hoses across the lot. Smoke rose in thin ghostly ribbons from the back wall, the same wall that had been there since the days of St. Mary's Clinic. When the fire chief came over, Richard expected anger or blame. Instead, the man simply said, "It is strange. The flame started inside the brick, not outside, almost like something behind it wanted out." The word stuck in Richard's mind long after the fire was gone. That night,
He could not sleep.
every time thunder rolled, he thought he heard something moving behind the drywall. Not rats. Something slower, heavier, like a faint heartbeat trapped in stone. The next morning he went back to the burned corner. The smell of smoke still clung to the air. And even though the bricks were cold, he could feel a pulse, a warmth that throbbed beneath his palm, like blood moving under skin. He ordered a contractor to open the wall. They refused. One of them, an older man with a cross around his neck, looked pale when Richard pointed to the spot. "Sir, you do not touch that wall. That place is not empty." Richard laughed, believed it was just superstition. He had grown tired of ghost stories. He wanted answers. He wanted to prove there was nothing inside but old pipes and soot. So he did it himself. He brought a hammer, a flashlight, and a stubborn pride that always pushed him too far. Each hit echoed through the empty hall like a heartbeat. Dust filled his lungs. Chunks of plaster fell away. And then the hammer hit something soft. Not wood, not concrete. Soft. He leaned closer, shined his light through the hole, and froze. Inside the wall, buried within the brick, was a bundle wrapped in charred hospital cloth. He reached in, pulled it out slowly. The fabric tore open in his hands. Inside lay something small, fragile, a shape that could only belong to a newborn child, its bones fused together by time and heat. For a moment, the whole world fell silent. The storm outside stopped. Even the hum of the city vanished, as if everything around him was holding its breath. Then came the whisper, a woman's voice. Right behind his ear. "You found my son." Richard dropped the bundle, stumbled backward. His flashlight rolled across the floor, and in its weak beam, he saw her. Elena! The same woman Luis had seen months ago. Her skin half burned, eyes glimmering like wet glass. She stood between him and the door. The smell of medicine and smoke filled the room. Richard tried to speak, tried to say he was sorry, but the words stuck in his throat. "Do you know what he did to me?" she asked. Her voice sounded like wind scraping across metal. "He promised to keep us safe. He said no one would ever know. Then he took our life and hid us behind his wall." She looked down at the tiny remains on the floor. "For 50 years I waited. No prayers, no names, only silence." She lifted her gaze. and Richard felt his knees weaken. Now the wall remembers, and so will you. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Richard could not move. He felt the air grow heavy, thick with the smell of burning antiseptic. A deep ringing filled his ears, and for a moment he thought he heard crying, soft infant cries rising from inside the walls. He ran, burst out into the rain, and did not stop until he reached his car. He did not return for days, but when he finally gathered courage to check the building again, something had changed. The tenants were whispering. They said at night they could hear a lullaby playing through the vents, old and broken, as if someone was rocking a child that no longer existed. One tenant swore she saw a woman's reflection in her window, even though she lived on the 3rd floor. Another said she woke up with burn marks on her wrists. Richard decided it was time to sell the property. He wanted nothing more to do with it, but the buyers never came. Every time a deal was close, something happened. A burst pipe, a power outage, a shadow caught on security cameras that made workers quit. The building refused to be forgotten. Months passed, and Richard started to dream about the woman. At first she stood in the hallway, silent. Then she began to whisper. Over and over, never spit near a wall. He would wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, always with the same taste of smoke in his mouth. He tried burning sage, calling priests, even sleeping in hotels, but no matter where he went, he could hear that soft voice behind him, closer each night. He started digging into old archives, looking for records about the hospital. He found yellowed newspapers from 1973, photos of Dr. Howard Bell, a clean-shaven man with sharp eyes and a smile that hid too much. The report said the fire started after a failed operation, but witnesses had conflicting stories. Some claimed to have heard shouting before the blaze. Others mentioned a woman screaming for help while someone tried to muffle her voice. The last entry before the hospital closed listed one death, Elena Ruiz, 28 years old, pregnant, unmarried. Cause of death, accidental suffocation during emergency procedure. Accidental. That word burned in his mind. Richard became obsessed. He printed every photo, lined them across his wall, traced the timeline of the doctor's disappearance, and noticed something strange. 2 weeks after the fire, a man named Henry Bell bought property just outside Austin, registered under a different middle name. Richard drove there, determined to uncover the truth. But what he found was far worse than he expected. The property was overgrown. The small house looked abandoned, but inside, everything was frozen in time. Surgical equipment, medical charts, a half-finished letter on the table. The letter was addressed to Elena. It read, "You left me no choice. You ruined my life. They would have taken everything. I only wanted peace. Forgive me if you can." Richard dropped the letter. He knew then that Elena's spirit had never left the hospital, because her story had never been told. Her truth had been sealed behind that wall. Richard returned to the apartment that night, and for the first time, he spoke out loud into the empty hallway. "Elena!" "I found him. I know what he did." At first there was silence. Then a soft breath swept through the room, and the temperature dropped so fast he could see his own breath. The lights flickered again, but this time they did not go out. Instead, they brightened, revealing the shadow of a woman standing beside the old wall. She did not look angry anymore. She looked tired, as if she had been waiting for someone to finally listen. "Show them," she whispered. "Show them what he did to us." Richard nodded. He knew what she wanted. He gathered all his documents, the photos, the letter, and went to the press. The story exploded across the city. Doctor's secret exposed after 50 years. Headlines everywhere. People who had been born at St. Mary's began sharing memories. Old nurses came forward, confirming rumors that had been buried for decades. The city council announced plans to turn the building into a memorial and to recover the remains found inside the wall for proper burial. For the first time, Elena's name was spoken with respect. Her story became history, not a ghost tale. That night, Richard returned to the building one last time. He lit a candle near the repaired wall and whispered, "You can rest now." For a moment, the air shimmered, and he thought he saw her again. Not burned, not broken, Just a woman holding a baby, smiling softly before fading into light. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something carved into the brick, letters so faint they almost vanished in shadow. Never spit near a wall. He smiled sadly, understanding now that it was never a threat. It was a warning. A reminder that walls remember everything, and sometimes they remember for those who cannot speak. Past. And the story of St. Mary's slowly faded into the background noise of city life. New buildings rose. Traffic drowned out whispers, and most people forgot about the woman who died behind the wall. But legends do not die. They wait. Richard eventually moved to another state. He donated the building to the city before leaving, and a memorial plaque was placed at the entrance. It read, "In memory of Elena Ruiz and her unborn child, may truth keep them safe." For a while, the place was quiet. Visitors came, left flowers, said prayers. But then, inevitably, someone new moved in. The city leased the upper floors to university students, young people with restless energy and no patience for ghost stories. Among them was Tyler, a business major with a loud laugh and a habit of mocking anything spiritual. He moved into the same garage room that once belonged to Luis. He liked it because it was cheap, private, and close to his campus job. The first night he unpacked, he noticed the wall near his bed looked newer than the rest. Different paint texture, slightly darker. He tapped it and joked, "Maybe this is where they buried the ghosts." His friends laughed. One of them warned him about the old story, told him about the doctor. The fire? The woman who died giving birth. Tyler shrugged it off. All superstition, he said. Just a way to scare renters. But as the night deepened and the house settled into silence, he began to feel something strange. A low hum behind the wall, barely audible, like a heartbeat muffled by distance. He told himself it was just pipes, air vents, old wiring. He turned up his music and stayed awake until dawn. The next evening he had friends over. They brought beer, laughed, played loud music. The old plaque outside the hall bothered Tyler. He called it creepy, a waste of space. And while drunk, he bragged that he was not afraid of any dead woman. To prove it, he went outside to the back of the building, stood near the wall, and spat. He laughed, mocking the old warning, saying aloud, "See, nothing happens." His friends laughed with him, but one of them, a quiet girl named Eva, looked uneasy. She whispered, "You should not do that." Tyler waved her off, and the group went inside. That night, the air grew heavy again, around 3 a.m. Tyler woke to the sound of dripping water. He groaned, thinking the roof was leaking, but then realized the noise came from the wall beside his bed. Drip, drip. He touched the wall, and his fingers came away red. He stumbled back, heart racing. The air turned freezing cold, and from the corner of the room, a faint figure began to form. A woman, half seen, half light. Her face was burned, her gown scorched. She looked at him with eyes that were both sorrow and fury. "You spit where I rest." Her voice was calm, so calm, it was worse than shouting. Tyler tried to speak. "I did not mean anything by it. I was just joking." She stepped closer. Every light in the room flickered, and the smell of smoke filled the air. "You laughed at pain," she said. "You mocked memory." Tyler's throat tightened. He gasped for air as if invisible hands were pressing down on his chest. "You will understand," she whispered, "what it feels like to be silenced." The lights went out completely, and all that remained was the sound of muffled crying. Not his. Hers. When the lights came back on, Tyler was lying on the floor, his breath shallow, his voice gone. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Not that night. Not ever again. The next morning, his friends found him sitting by the window, eyes wide, voice still missing. Doctors said it was psychological trauma, no physical damage to his throat. They called it sudden selective mutism. But Eva, the quiet girl who had been there that night, knew better, she said when she entered the room. The smell of burned roses filled the air, and on the wall behind Tyler's bed, fresh words had appeared, carved deep into the plaster. "Never spit near a wall." No one ever stayed in that room again. Eventually, the building was shut down for good, turned into a sealed memorial. No one allowed inside. Yet every year, on the anniversary of the fire, flowers appear at the gate, always the same kind Elena used to love, white lilies. And sometimes, when the night is quiet, passers-by swear they can hear two voices through the brick, a woman singing softly and a baby cooing back. Stories like this remind us that not every act of disrespect is forgotten. Some things carry weight, even the smallest gesture, even one careless spit near a wall. Because you never know what listens on the other side. Elena's story became legend in Houston, a whispered warning among construction workers and night drivers. Never spit near a wall, they say, because the dead remember. And sometimes, they remember with fire. Maybe the real lesson is not about ghosts. Maybe it is about memory. About how cruelty, even when forgotten by the living, still leaves a mark somewhere. In stone, in time, in air. Luis learned it through fear, Richard through truth, and Tyler through silence. Some walls echo pain until someone listens, and when justice finally arrives, it does not shout, it whispers, "Do not." If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell me in the comments. Do you believe some places remember what we do? And of course, subscribe for more stories where justice never sleeps and the dead never forget, because sometimes revenge is not loud. It is eternal.